People think hauntings start with a shadow, a whisper, a cold breeze, some vague presence you can rationalize until it goes away. But Clarita Villanueva didn't get that kind of haunting. Hers wasn't subtle. Hers didn't creep. It attacked, hard, violent, intelligent. And what made her case different from every possession story, before or after, wasn't tea. Just what happened to her. It was what happened around her, above her, in the rooms she never entered, and in the offices where men with power quietly discussed her fate. Because once you dig into Clarita's case, you realize one thing fast. The demons weren't the only ones trying to control her. If you're someone who doesn't run from the dark, who actually wants to hear the parts of Clarita's story that were never meant to be public, then stay with me. Just know that once you hear what was really happening in Manila in 1953, you won't forget it. And before we go deeper, hit subscribe right now, because the truth we cover here isn't the sanitized version, and you won't find this kind of storytelling anywhere else. Clarita Villanueva was 17 years old when her life was ripped apart by something no one at the time even had vocabulary for. This was 1953 Manila City, still recovering from war, from poverty, from strict religious control, from a government trying to appear stable while dealing with corruption under the surface. Clarita should have been invisible. A teenager without family, living on the streets, scraping by the way thousands did. But on one night, a night that started like every other, she found herself in a jail cell, crying out for something no one believed, until they saw her skin tear open without any visible hand touching her. Her story became a demonic possession to the newspapers, to Hollywood. Later, it became a profitable inspiration to religious leaders, a showcase of spiritual warfare. Alada. But what most people forget is that Clarita didn't start as a victim of the city, of the system, and maybe of something far older than anyone wanted to admit. And if you follow the trail properly, you'll see that the haunting didn't begin in the jail cell. It began years before, in a place no one ever investigated. And it didn't end where the official reports say it ended, either. They arrested Clarita for vagrancy. That was the official term. In reality, it meant she was poor, homeless, and in the wrong place at the wrong time. Police tossed her into a filthy cell, a dim concrete box that smelled of sweat and stagnant water. She tried to sleep, curled against the corner, until she felt something brush her leg. She assumed it was a rat. But rats don't laugh. The first attack was silent, fast, a sting on her thigh, a burning sensation spreading like liquid fire. When the guards came to check, her skin was slashed open clean, precise, like a surgical cut. But no blade, no tool, no human hand had touched her. The second attack wasn't silent. Guards heard her scream like she was being torn apart. When they ran in, they found bite marks appearing on her arm, fresh, bloody, and moving, like an invisible mouth was chewing its way up her skin. This wasn't hysteria. This wasn't panic. The injuries were real, documented, photographed. But here's where the story starts twisting in ways the public never heard. Witnesses weren't random. They were selected. City officials, military officers, clergymen, and strangely foreign visitors were escorted into Clarita's cell over the next few days. They weren't there for compassion. They weren't there for medical support. They were there to observe, to study, to evaluate what she could become. A teenage girl being torn apart by an unseen force. And a room full of men watching like it was a spectacle. You have to ask, why so many powerful people suddenly cared about a homeless teenager? Most modern retellings ignore this part, but according to early Manila police notes that later disappeared, Clarita's mother was a local mangkukulam, a practitioner of folk rituals and spirit work. Not a witch, the way Western stories paint it. More like someone who knew how to deal with darker energies, older beliefs, the kind people whispered about but never confronted openly. She died when Clarita was still young, leaving her daughter exposed to a world that eats the unprotected alive. But what no one asked was what kind of rituals Clarita had been around as a child, or what had been attached to her before she ever stepped into that jail cell. Possession cases don't come out of nowhere. Something always opens the door. The story becomes stranger when you look at the timeline. Clarita's attacks intensified right after a foreign missionary group arrived in Manila, one with ties to psychological operations during the war. Their sudden interest in her wasn't compassion. It was opportunity. A possessed girl was a spectacle that could be used, displayed, measured, publicized. Every major newspaper began reporting on her case with the exact same language, almost word for word, like they weren't reporting, but following instructions. The story blew up internationally in a matter of days. And while the world watched Clarita twist and convulse as invisible forces threw her across her cell, another story was playing out behind the scenes. Two doctors who examined her claimed her symptoms were consistent with trauma-based dissociation, a polite scientific way of saying she'd been abused so badly her mind fractured. Both doctors were removed from the case within hours. One left Manila, one vanished. The remaining medical team was replaced by advisors aligned with the visiting missionaries' men, whose careers benefited if Clarita's experience confirmed their worldview. And inside her cell, Clarita kept crying the same words over and over. They're coming, they want something. But whenever someone pressed her to explain what they wanted, she fell into silence like there was a memory she wasn't allowed to speak aloud. The climax of her possession is usually told like a spiritual victory. Church leaders performed an exorcism. She convulsed. She screamed. The entity allegedly spoke. And then finally left. But that's the sanitized version. Witness reports that never made it to the newspapers describe something else. Clarita became lucid for a full minute during the ritual. She looked directly at the men in the room, one by one. And she said a sentence that terrified every person who heard it. "It's not in me. It's behind you." Moments later, the lights went out. Witnesses claimed to hear movement, heavy, dragging steps circling the room. By the time the lights came back on, Clarita was unconscious, and one of the observers had deep bite marks on his shoulder. After the ritual, Clarita's possession ended instantly, not gradually, not slowly, immediately. One moment tormented, the next moment calm. But here's the part the public never heard. Clarita wasn't released back into society. She was taken to a private facility owned by the same missionary network that had hovered around her case since day one. Her records disappear after that point. 4 years. Some say she recovered and lived a quiet life. Some say she died shortly after. Some say she was studied, experimented on, or moved from place to place, used as evidence whenever powerful people needed her story to prove a point. But everyone agrees on one thing. Her haunting wasn't just spiritual. It was political. It was opportunistic. It was orchestrated. And the secret behind Clarita's haunting wasn't just the entity that attacked her. It was the people who used her pain to build narratives, influence the public, and bury evidence that didn't align with the story they wanted the world to believe. Clarita Villanueva wasn't just a possession case. She was a pawn in a game she never agreed to play. A girl swallowed by forces and unseen who were all fighting for control over her body, her story, and her suffering. Whenever a haunting becomes famous, you should always ask, who benefits? Because demons don't always wear horns. Sometimes they wear uniforms. Sometimes they wear collars. Sometimes they sit behind desks and call it help. Clarita's story wasn't erased because it was unbelievable. It was erased because it revealed too much. And if you want more stories, like this, stories that dig into the cracks, the missing files, the contradictions everyone else ignores, make sure you're subscribed. Because the deeper we go, the harder it gets to look away.